My name is Cynthia Silvey, and I photograph weeds. And I do this for two reasons. I got a degree in photography several years ago, and then I got a degree in landscape architecture a little more recently. And I found that these two forces kind of struggle within me whenever I encounter uninvited plants. So this picture has 6 invasive species in it. I'm a big fan of invasive species in a way. I always have to kind of hedge that one. I took a class, a very memorable class, with a man who is a researcher on plants of all kinds. He's a horticulturist. And his basic thesis for the class in his last 20 years of research is, if it's green, it's good. And so this idea challenges our belief that there's such a thing as a good plant and a bad plant. And obviously, I don't defend invasive species in all contexts. Obviously, I don't suggest planting them, where they'll destroy an ecosystem. But plants like this is Phragmites Australis, the common reed. You may have seen it everywhere, even in Vermont. Plants like this serve an ecological function. And in a world that is kind of rapidly in ecological decay, I think sometimes it's healthy to look at a weed and think, maybe that's not exactly where we want it, but maybe essentially, if it's green, it's good. So in the center of the image there, I'm told this picture is too subtle, but that little dome of material is a farm wastewater pond covered in Phragmites. And the reason it's covered in Phragmites is an excellent absorber of nitrogen and phosphorus. In other words, it will grow where a lot of other things will not grow, including here. This is a brownfield site in Burlington. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you where it is exactly, but, but there's nothing here but this thick layer of gravel and polluted soil underneath. And the only vegetative cover here is invasive, is uninvited. A lot of it is non-native. But if it weren't there, that site would be all gravel. I mean, it would be all reflecting heat, contributing to the heat island effect. So that little bit of green, in that case, even though we don't really want it to be our whole ecosystem, is good. This is Wisteria Sinensis. This is in Massachusetts. And I love things like fences for height comparisons with invasive species. That was a 12-foot fence. The wisteria had gone up and come back down. It's quite a plant, This is Robinia pseudoacacia, the black locust, which is a native species. It's commonly considered invasive because as people moved through the landscape in the early 19th century, it kind of moved with us. It moved into some places we don't necessarily want it, but now, it's a huge tree when it's mature. It's a huge carbon sink. It's making a lot of oxygen. This is actually Boston ivy. It's the non-native form. It's related to Virginia creeper. And the non-native is actually very good at staying where we put it. So that's a case of a non-native species that is not invasive. These titles get all jumbled up when you overthink it, which of course I always do. This is bamboo. This is actually planted in a very fine garden, also in Massachusetts. And the problem with bamboo is it may be the Japanese knotweed of the future. When we plant it, if a landscape architect suggests planting bamboo to a client, they suggest planting it with very deep edging so it doesn't escape. And things like Japanese knotweed were brought to the US, decades and decades ago as an ornamental. So someone thought, it'll be great in my garden. 50 years later, it's all over the place. That could potentially happen with a lot of aggressive plants that we plant in our yards. This picture is of ghost trees. It's very difficult to make an environment that a tree will like in the city, but it is not difficult at all to find an environment that things like annuals, grasses, will see themselves in. This is actually an urban lot. You couldn't really tell by looking at it unless you squint and find the houses in the back. So this particular lot was about to be converted into, a developed housing lot. But in the meantime, it had generated this very robust and probably almost exclusively non-native ecosystem. This, I just like the picture. What can I tell you? It is a tree growing where another tree was supposed to grow. But really, it's just, I don't know. I really do walk around and notice the weeds before I notice anything else. So, and then, you know, I was overeducated, so I have to find this way to justify my interest. So, and then, of course, in the country, we don't call them weeds anymore. We call them wildflowers. This is one of my favorites. This is Caltha palustris, marsh marigold. It just started blooming a couple weeks ago. And my favorite place to see this, I commute from Burlington to my home in Richmond, is southbound I-89 in the median. There's this gorgeous plantation of Caltha palustris. This is a compost pile that is sprouting uninvited guests, except that they are garden vegetables. This is a pumpkin in the middle. This plant, this plant was left and did eventually produce pumpkins, and then they got eaten by the squash beetles. But the point is, robust enough plant to have self-seeded and survived a whole season. This, of course, is burdock, which you'll be glad to know is not a native species. This one, even I don't like. I don't know what to tell you about burdock, except that it's only a biennial. It's got a 2-year life cycle, as opposed to a perennial. So if it had been a perennial, it would have taken over the earth. So we are glad that it is just a biennial. And this is another farm weed. This is actually related to Japanese knotweed very distantly, another polygonum. This is lady's thumb. And Japanese knotweed is kind of the ghost in the back of my mind here constantly, because there have been articles about how it's moving through Vermont post-Irene because of all of the destruction and displacement of soils. And I'm not going to tell you that I think that that's a good thing, really, but I will tell you that I've seen a lot of the reconstruction efforts on stream banks around Bethel in particular, and right now it's really ugly. It's really ugly, it's all gravel, and so it's possible that even in that context, a little bit of green will be good, even if we probably shouldn't let it take over the entire ecosystem. So, and then just to end, this is my very favorite weed, wildflower. This is New York aster. And I had the great fortune to live in a decrepit old farmhouse where the entire back field went to aster at the end of the year. Thank you.